Good afternoon. This is Black Contraband Media, and you are watching another reparationist educational series. In today's session, we'll be exploring the differences of leading Black American ideologies. We'll talk about the core tenets of certain movements within the reparationist movement, as well as how these movements identify key differences as well as key similarities. So let us begin. Let's start with ADOS. ADOS, or ADOS, stands for American Descendants of Slavery. This movement was started by Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore, as well as other grassroots activists across the United States. ADOS, or ADOS, has a framework that is based on the events of the transatlantic slave trade and the way it shaped the United States of America. ADOS believes that a debt is owed to the descendants of the formerly enslaved Black Americans who suffered the disadvantages of slavery and Jim Crow. As it relates to reparations, ADOS believe in a lineage-based approach that should be aimed at the descendants of American chattel slavery. This movement believes Black Americans should identify as American descendants of slavery in order to obtain delineation and reparations. Now, let's move on to FBA. FBA stands for Foundational Black Americans and is a movement largely created by Tariq Nasheed and others, and stands kind of in a unique position when compared to the ADOS movement. Foundational Black Americans have a framework that is based loosely on the events of the transatlantic slave trade and more so shaped by the events of pre-colonial America and the theory of Black Indians. Like ADOS, Foundational Black Americans believe in a lineage-based approach as it relates to reparations. Unlike ADOS, FBA have a strong belief that they are predominantly indigenous to America. Foundational Black Americans believe that Black Americans should identify as Black Indians or Black Aboriginals. They do not believe the out of Africa theory as it relates to the story of American chattel slavery and the history of the American colonies. Their movement is mainly focused on lineage, reparations, and tribal affiliation recognitions for foundational Black Americans that identify as Black Indians. Next on our list is American Freedmen. American Freedmen is a movement of reparations advocates who believe in reparative justice for the lineage of American freedmen who descend from surviving families of American chattel slavery and Jim Crow. Like ADOS and FBA, American freedmen are lineage-based and believe reparations are owed to the descendants of American freedmen for the injustices suffered at the hands of the American government. Unlike ADOS or FBA, American freedmen believe Black Americans should identify as descendants of freedmen to re-spark political interest in some of the political protections created to protect the formerly enslaved class of individuals. Politically speaking, American freedmen are focused on delineation, reparations, the reestablishment of an Office of American Freedmen, immigration reform, and political protections for American freedmen. Next up, we have Pan-Africans. Pan-Africans come from a movement of Afrocentric reparations advocates led by Pan-African-centered individuals or organizations. To give an example, some individuals would include individuals such as Sheila Jackson Lee, or Ron Daniels, or Cam Howard, or organizations such as NARCOR and COBRA. Their framework is based on the belief that all people of African descent require reparations and repair for the effects of white supremacy. Unlike American Freedmen, FBA, and ADOS, Pan-Africans believe a race-based reparations program should be aimed at all Africans or people with Black or melanated skin for the history of slavery and the impacts that it has had on the Black race. The Pan-African movement is centered on a political approach that drops ethnicity for race in the attempt to unite all Black people. Pan-Africans believe Black Americans should embrace their African heritage and reclaim their homelands on the continent of Africa. Most Pan-Africans seek to become one people with the peoples of the continent of Africa. The main focus of Pan-Africans are repatriation to Africa, reform of American foreign policy, more immigration, and a world where Blacks can thrive like whites. Last on our list is American Indians. American Indians or Aboriginals are a movement of Native American-centric reparations advocates. Their movement is led by those of a mindset similar to individuals such as Dan Calloway. Unlike ADOS, FBA, or American freedmen, or even Pan-Africans, American Indians do not believe in the Out of Africa theory or the transatlantic slave trade. Their framework is based on the idea that black indigenous people were reclassified as blacks and denied their tribal inheritance by way of violation of certain treaties. American Indians believe that they are a majority of the descendants of slavery in America and that all blacks must reclassify themselves to American Indians in order to obtain true justice. Similar to Pan-Africans, they are focused on the race-based approach that claims all people of America are owed reparations for the injustices suffered by their families. The main focus of their movement is reclassification, tribal recognition, land-based reparations, and sovereignty for American Indian people. American Indians believe that black Americans should identify as American Indians from distinct tribes of the Americas. Similar to Pan-Africans, they do believe that black Americans should seek to claim the tribes that they would have possessed prior to slavery. American Indians believe that by way of identification of the tribes prior to slavery, that black Americans or black Aboriginal people will be able to restore the lands and treaties that were once stolen from their people. Now that you guys have heard an explanation, I hope all of this information makes sense to you. Now let's do a quick high-level recap of what we just covered. ADOS stands for American Descendants of Slavery. ADOS believes in a lineage-based reparations approach. ADOS believes that black Americans should identify as American descendants of slavery. They are interested in delineation, data disaggregation, immigration reform, reparations, and political protections for American descendants of slavery. Similar to ADOS, but very different, foundational black Americans also believe in delineation, data disaggregation, immigration reform, reparations, and political protections. Where they differ is that they believe reparations should be made available to the former black Indians as well as the formerly black enslaved populations in the United States of America. That is a vast distinction from groups such as the American freedmen or ADOS that seek to keep reparations lineage-based and focused on the African descendants of American chattel slavery. For movements such as the American Indians or FBA, there is a focus or need for the identification of peoples who were reclassified as Negroes or blacks, and for those people to reclaim the lost lands and inheritances stolen from their people. From a Pan-African approach, Pan-Africans believe that all black people in America should receive reparations no matter what country they're from or if they're of immigrant origin. Pan-Africans believe that no matter your ethnicity, the simple fact that you are black and you have entered the United States, you are subject to the same repair as black Africans who were enslaved in the United States of America. Similar to the American Indians, their movement has a heavy emphasis on tribe affiliation, as well as the need to identify with the blanket term of being African. Now, you would ask, how is that similar to the American Indian situation? Well, where they're similar is that the American Indian has specific ties to the continents of Americas, and they believe that you should also seek a tribal affiliation in order to go back to the previous conditions of black Americans before colonization of the Americas. Now, American freedmen, while similar to ADOS, the main key difference is that there is a heavy focus on American freedmen in the history or identification of the freedmen protection class that was created for the formerly enslaved black Americans. When looked at from an analytical view, ADOS or American freedmen have a different ideology that is based around the naming or the current naming of black Americans in their current political protection status. Similarities between FBA and American Indians also exist. FBAs and American Indians both recognize the indigenous blood that could flow in some African Americans. Where they differ from ADOS or freedmen is that they believe that black Indians were at one point a great population here in the United States and that those people were enslaved. Their stories are similar, or their frameworks are similar, in that they seek justice for the Indians that were formerly reclassed under colonization or white supremacy in America. Similarities between Pan-Africans, ADOS, and freedmen is that they believe in the framework of the transatlantic slave trade, and do not make any attempts to denounce the histories that were proposed. Pan-Africans, unfortunately, are different from ADOS and Freedmen in that they believe in a race-based approach where all people of African descent are due reparations due to the injustices suffered by certain ethnic groups in America. On the other hand, ADOS and American Freedmen believe that the specific injured party or the specific surviving families of American chattel slavery and Jim Crow, i.e. the Freedmen, should receive reparations. With that said, it is my hope that this presentation provides you, the audience, with an insight into the current movements at play in the reparations movement for Black Americans. Brought to you in partnership by Black Contraband Media and Go Create Media LLC. Thank you for watching.